Happy Wednesday, and welcome to a special edition of BBOC Live. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-host, Colin Wilson. Something we're doing a little new this year. We're recording part of the podcast live. If you are one of our loyal listeners, number one, we appreciate you. But you would already know at the end of each episode for the weekend preview, we do our 3 and out. Do our underdog money line parlay, our favorite. We'll talk about all the Friday night games. And then we're going to add a fourth down this year with our favorite bet of the weekend. So we'll get to all of that, including the Friday games. Keep in mind, we're doing this on Wednesday night. In the future, we will always do this Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. It will still go into the podcast, and the rest of the podcast will remain the same. We'll preview the entire weekend, and that'll be out the same time as usual. We wanted to get week 1 out a day early since there's no NFL and the slate is loaded. So before we do get started, if you're watching on YouTube, welcome to our new channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe and like button. Really helps us out as we're trying to grow the channel. So please make sure you hit both. Colin, we're officially back. We have college football on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We're here. How's it going?
We're here. It's a supersized sandwich. 5 days of football, no NFL interruptions. The whole entire world revolves around college football. I couldn't be happier about it. I see some FCS upsets. I see some big dogs. I see some big favorites. There's a lot of juicy stuff on the board. I'm ready to break it all down.
Yeah, in the main pod episode, we'll do a quick recap of what we saw in week 0. And as I said previously, we'll go through all the big games, Clemson, Georgia, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Florida, Miami, etc. And of course, we'll get a rundown in some other games you like and some trash, as usual from me, with some of the worst games on the board that I'll talk through. But let's start off with first down. And let's go to Friday night for some Friday night lights. Let's talk a little Temple. Yes, Temple. Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a 42-ish point favorite here. Total is 58. See that big number? Historically, huge favorites in college football. They haven't fared well, but for what it's worth, in week 1, FBS versus FBS matchups, these big favorites have done pretty well. Looking at you, Oklahoma and Ohio State, which is laying even a bigger number against lowly Akron. Reason this number is so high, in Oklahoma, pretty good, but Temple is not. Temple is a mess. They are bottom 5 in returning production. This team has the dreaded oars across the quarterback depth chart. You got Evan Simon, the Rutgers transfer, Boris Brock, the backup from last year. You got a red shirt freshman up there, and Tyler Douglas, because they lost EJ Warner from last year. The offensive line, which I believe gave up 13 sacks in the spring game. You have a freshman left tackle, a sophomore left guard, a sophomore transfer center, a decent senior right guard. That's probably the best thing I could say about the offensive line. And then a freshman right tackle. Left tackle, right tackle, center, 0 career FBS starts. Defense will move to more of a 4-3 base. I expect like 2 tight end sets. Try to run it, but I don't know if their lead back is going to be able to kind of carry the workload. He was pretty small against what should be an excellent Oklahoma defense. I think that's probably the story here. I mean, whenever you're dealing with spreads this large, it is a little tough because it's like, when does Oklahoma decide to pull the plug? Or maybe they're like a Hawaii and the game's 14-14 in the third quarter. I doubt that happens here, but you never know. But I'm assuming that Oklahoma's up big. When do they pull the plug? When do they just put their backups in? When do they just start bleeding the clock? How much do they want to run it up, et cetera, et cetera? Always plays a lot of high variance with totals. It spreads this high. Look, I have here, I would lean Oklahoma. I don't know how Temple scores. So Temple under, team total under. What is it, probably 7.5? You can get over a touchdown. That's the way I would look. This should be a rout. Temple is a mess. I just can't see their offense doing much of anything. What do you see here?
Well, the standard rate is not going well up at Temple. Their sacks have been cut in half every year. Last year, FBS worst, only 5 takeaways on the season. That is pretty impressive in the wrong way for Temple. Their program's going completely the opposite direction that they need to, and I don't think it's going to get any better. But the question really is, when will Oklahoma take their foot off the pedal? I don't think that's the question. I think the question is, will Oklahoma take their foot off the pedal? This is a team that is making their introductory game into the SEC. I would suspect they want to look pretty good here, put up a score that's really going to open up some eyes. Plus, let's talk about what happened in the bowl game. Jackson Arnold was terrible in his debut as a starter with Dylan Gabriel gone to Oregon now. That bowl game was
I'm sure you
not
want
good
to
for him.
boost his confidence up before that brutal schedule.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's our overlook here? Well, we don't really have one. It's Houston in 8 days. So there's no reason to like not show anything out of the playbook. This is all about reps because who else needs reps on this Oklahoma team? The offensive line, 5 new starters that haven't played in the game together. I would assume that they are, I mean, Venables was asked, are they going to play the entire game? He didn't give a clear answer. There's every expectation this offensive line needs snaps and they're going to play the entire game. And if you need more evidence that possibly they're going to run it up, everybody remember what the score was last year when Venables took on Arkansas State in the opener? 73-0.
Is
There's
that the
only one way.
Butch Jones crying game?
Still crying. Yeah. So there's no way I can see. I think the Sooners are going to put Arkansas State on I-40 and just run them all the way back to Jonesboro. So I'm sorry. That's what they did to them last year. I think that's what they're going to do to Temple, except they're going to do it all the way up to Philly. So it looks like bad news for Temple here.
By the way, it is good to be back breaking down a full college football slate. It's good to be back with all of you. I have no peace anymore. Once the college football season started, there's no peace. I don't sleep. I'm constantly watching the board, watching notifications, info, research. There's no peace anymore. There won't be any peace until after the college basketball national title. But when I'm here, I can't be looking at the board, so it's a nice release to be talking some college football. And then obviously once the game's kicked, that to me is my ultimate piece. As crazy as that sounds, but let's move on to the next game here. FAU traveling to Michigan State. Michigan State close to a 2-touchdown favorite here. Line's been bouncing around a bit. Total, believe, is sitting, last I saw, 45.5. A lot of changes on both teams in the offseason. FAU coaching stability year 2, Tom Herman, but the roster was gutted. So they lost a ton, bottom 10 returning production in the country. You're going to have Cam Fancher start at quarterback, the Marshall transfer. I'm not a fan. They lose everything, including their star receiver, Wester, 4 offensive linemen, top 3 receivers, you name it, they lost it. They like the portal hauls they brought in on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not fully sold. Michigan State, meanwhile, wholesale changes, bringing a new staff led by Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. He comes in, brings his posse with him. He brings his offensive coordinator, his offensive line coach, Aiden Childs, a new quarterback, big upgrade there, really talented kid. His center, his tight end. So I think the offensive line, which is a mess last year, they averaged like 2.6 yards per carry. And I think improvement there. Get a good center in. You have a really good offensive line coach coming in, really good offensive coordinator. And the coaching hire is why I bumped Michigan State so much. There are questions. That offensive line outside of center definitely has questions. Who's going to be that alpha to emerge at wide receiver? Definitely questions there, but I think the run game will be better. And, where I think Michigan State's going to be weak, I'm not really sure. Florida Atlantic can take full advantage. And this Michigan State secondary was bad last year, but a lot of injuries. So a lot of guys got some experience. I think they're going to be improved on the back end. Linebacker, probably the strength. Did lose a couple guys in the interior of the portal, which might hurt on the defensive end. But I think this Michigan State team, little too soon to really be like talking about them maybe going to a bowl. Could get in the conversation, but it's a program that's on the rise. Incredible hire. I think Jonathan Smith wants to make a statement here. So I bumped them big for the coaching hire. FAU, big downgrade for the returning production and the quarterback. So I like Michigan State, but you got to get under 2 touchdowns. I will say if it's late and Smith just looks like he's starting to park the bus and Michigan State is up big, I might look to come back on some to maybe middle this. FAU maybe goes to Stark, so I think probably would be the better option at the starter. And Michigan State with a conference game next week maybe doesn't try to keep their foot on the gas. What do you see here? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, the number from the side perspective, I wanted to stay away from because we have so many questions with this Michigan State roster because essentially East Lansing is now turned into Corvallis East. So, we'll have to see what they have, what they can put on the field. Jonathan Smith is an excellent coach. I thought he would have been perfect at a place like Arkansas where they want a power run game. He's going to get them going just like he did Oregon State. And Florida Atlantic, Tom Herman had, I think, the highest experience numbers in the world of any team in FBS last year, completely massively underachieved last year with them. So it's hard to gauge. I made this number in the high single digits. I think SP Plus had this around 12. There's a huge battle going on right now. The 14 and a halfs all got scooped up on Florida Atlantic. 13 and a halfs are getting hit by Michigan State. But if I had to make a bet on this game, I would look at the under. There's a 25% chance of rain in the forecast. Jonathan Smith wants to go to his bread and butter. It's going to be on the ground. And I'm not sure Florida Atlantic is good enough to contribute here, especially with Cam Fancher. He's lost us plenty of money when he was with Marshall. So for me, the look would be the under. I think that is the reason why we've had a tick down in the total. I would assume that would continue to tick down if this forecast gets worse.
Yeah. All right. Something to keep an eye on there. Definitely it's we're not fully in the mix yet, but once college football starts, you're always in weather watching mode for forecasts. So make sure that's something that you do keep in mind. Let's move on to the next game here. Western Michigan. We get some action heading to Madison to take on Wisconsin. Wisconsin's around a 24-point favorite. I think total sitting around 56 and a half. Western Michigan, it's some people's darling, preseason darling, sleeper in the MAC. Why? Returning production, which is rare in the MAC these days when teams are just getting gutted with the portal and through other methods. But Western Michigan brings back a lot from a pretty bad team, if I'm being honest. They were a little better once Wolf took over at quarterback. He's back, the former ODU transfer. Really good back in Buckley, two really good offensive linemen, bring back everyone on the outside at receiver. So it's a team that has a lot of experience. The defense also has experience, but how much more experience, how much is more experience going to lead to better results? That's my question, because the two guys that they did lose, one of them looks really good on the Cowboys, their defensive end. One of them, their cornerback, signed with an NFL team, so they lost two of their better players. Their defense still could be very bad. Remember, this is a team that early in the season last year got boat raced by Syracuse and Iowa. I think they lost 49-7 to Syracuse, maybe 41-10 to Iowa, if I'm recalling correctly. So where do they stand now with that added experience in year two of Lance Taylor? Wisconsin, it's year two of this air raid experiment. Will that work? I'm not sure it does. It's just such a, it seems like it's just such a mismatch for what we know of Wisconsin is, and with where they play and the weather and the Big Ten and their physicality. There are some questions on this roster. They do bring in Tyler Van Dyke. We'll see if, hey, is he healthy? Can he avoid the mistakes? Interior offensive line, they got two really good tackles. Bit of a question mark. The defensive end, on the defensive end, linebackers are new. Got two really good defensive backs, but the defensive line is a major question for me, especially since they lost one of their stars to injury in Thompson. Can they get pressure? Can Western Michigan control the line of scrimmage, get Buckley going? If I had to pick a side here, I would lean Western Michigan, especially at 24, but I'm just a little hesitant that maybe that returning experience, we just saw them in the MAC, is going to be just completely overmatched here. I guess with Wisconsin, what do you see here?
The Wisconsin offense with Phil Longo, we're going into the second year of this. It was a big question that I had at Media Day for Luke Fickell, which was why, what is going on with the Phil Longo offense? This isn't what I've seen at Ole Miss. This isn't what I've seen at North Carolina. And, it came down to the fact that the skill position players that they had on the outside didn't have the ability to create separation to get those explosive plays going. Now, I haven't heard that they've identified anybody on the outside for TVD to have those explosives. So right now, this Wisconsin offense, based on where they're at, based on this history of running backs that are 270 pounds and then going to dominate the NFL, it's kind of like wearing your pants backwards, like having Phil Longo there trying to run up tempo spread. It just doesn't make any sense. But we're going to see if they can get separation from their skill positions and get some explosive plays, because it was amazing. This Wisconsin team was top 10 in havoc allowed. They were so disciplined. They didn't make any mistakes. But at the same time, they were like bottom 10 in explosives. It was the weirdest thing that I saw in the stat sheet. So it's really out for question whether they can look explosive and create chunk plays. As far as the Western Michigan side goes, I mean, you mentioned it. These directional schools from the MAC, when they go up against the Big Ten and the ACC, it's disaster, complete disaster. And the hesitation that I have is Walt Bell at offensive coordinator for Western Michigan. I know the expectations are high, and you can see it in the market. When this number gets to 24, there's been a scoop up on the Broncos here because of all the experience that they return. But at the same time, this is an offensive coordinator that is a complete stay away from me when it comes to my money, because when he was at Florida State, he was essentially ran out of town, out of the coaching room. He gets to UMass, he's there for a couple of years, and I believe there were some players that had some hostile feelings about him being the head coach. So it just hasn't worked anywhere he's gone. He's never improved an offense anywhere that he's been. So, I make the game around 21. It's a little bit too high for me. You can see that there's others that have power ratings that make that, because 24s are getting scooped. Probably a stay away for me. If I had to pick a side, if there's a knockdown on the Wisconsin number, I would probably throw couch change on that.
All right, let's move on to the final game, final FBS versus FBS matchup on Friday. Let's talk a little TCU Stanford out west. Stanford, interesting case. I mean, college football week 1, anyone that tells you it's easy to handicap is lying, especially in today's landscape. So much turnover. There's just so much variance with all of the roster movement. And then the other piece you have to figure out, we just talked about Western Michigan, bad team last year. How much are they going to improve, in year 2 of a coaching staff with a lot of returning experience? Where do they fall? That's the difficult part of offseason prep. Same thing with Stanford. This is a team, it was basically year 0 for Taylor last year. I mean, their roster got absolutely gutted in the offseason, and now they bring back as much production as any team in the country. They do have the oars across the quarterback chart. You got a stud freshman that's in the mix too as well. Wide receiver, strength of the team. My question with Stanford is, and look, TCU, they lost 2 offensive linemen, 3 defensive backs to the NFL from a team that really underperformed after making the national title. Hoping some transfers can help in that mix, but they have some really talented skill position players. Hoover back, quarterback, offensive line remains a bit of a mystery and a question mark. So we'll see how that works out. But my concern for Stanford, who I do think will be improved naturally, just in year 2 of Taylor, we both think is a good coach, a lot more experience. Still concerned about just the overall size of the offensive line, which, look, has to be better. They had only 15 returning career starts going into last year, bring a ton back this year. Same with the defensive line. So are they going to get overpowered? And then in the secondary was horrendous last year. Bring everyone back, but I still think the safeties are really bad. There's some holes there. So a bit concerned about, just the interior, the secondary for Stanford. But, if this at 10-ish, I would lean with the tree. What say you?
Yeah, at 10, this is an absolute buy on Stanford. This offense is a headache for opposing defensive coordinators. Quarterback Ashton Daniels is back, and then the wide receiver Alec Ayomanor is there, and they are a just a throw and catch combination that a lot of teams have struggled with. And really, that's all because of pre-snap and what Troy Taylor does with his offense. If you break down the run concepts of what Stanford does, they ran as many plays that were labeled trick plays as they did inside and outside zone read from a rushing perspective. It's crazy what this offense does. It is a beautiful thing to watch. Stanford may not win a lot of games, but it's a fun offensive watch. So much pre-snap motion. It's like Kansas on steroids, except this is like number 2, number 3 in the nation and up tempo. So they can really catch defenses off guard. And that's what goes into the handicap, is this TCU defense was abominable last year. They fired Joseph Gillespie, that 3-3-5, sort of that pinch that they were trying to do in the middle, stop the run, limit explosives, didn't work from any angle. They were back to square one when they let Gary Patterson go before Sonny Dykes got there. They went and hired Andy Avalos, and the first thing that they decide is, we're going to run Avalos's 4-2-5 that he had up at Boise State, same defense he had at Oregon. Neither of them worked out well whatsoever. So now TCU's decided they're going to go to a 4-man front, and then immediately their best interior player on the defensive line, Demonic Williams, decides to hit the transfer portal and go to Oklahoma. So there's not a lot of depth in this defensive line. They're putting extra guys. Depth's a huge problem, and they're going to try to stop the run. And you really don't know. I mean, it's a balanced offense for Stanford, but it's a crazy, if you're following the motion, you're going to get tied up and you're going to have some chunk plays go past you. The big problem for TCU also is there's just no havoc in this defense whatsoever. They did not get anything in the portal that suggests that they're going to increase their tackles for loss, increase their sacks, or increase their PBUs. So, we'll see what this defense can do, but I'm just not a fan of the depth. I'm not a fan of Avalos. And then when you go back and you look at what Troy Taylor did last year with Stanford when he had time to prepare, look at two of these wins last year, Hawaii and Colorado. If you go check those out on the schedule, Hawaii was game one. Troy Taylor had all summer to prepare for that. They won that game. And then when they played Colorado in the middle of the season, Troy Taylor had 2 weeks to prepare for that Buffalo's team. They won that game outright as double-digit underdog. So there's a case to be made that Troy Taylor here, you give him extra time because he literally, interviewing him and seeing it, he's like a professor. He's running around with a book that he could throw and give you an injury. I mean, it's really great what he does from an offensive perspective, and he is very prepared on game day. Not like Sonny Dykes, who was a 21-point favorite last year, and Colorado beat him in the very first game of the season. That does not instill confidence in me whatsoever. Give me Stanford plus 10. The defense, I think, is still going to be horrible, but the Cardinal their best game plan is shootouts with everybody, which they can do. So I'll take 10 points.
Yeah, the good news is strength for Stanford's at wide receiver, and I think that's where you want to attack this TCU team. Linebackers are really, really good. Bring in Orr too. You already had a bunch of guys there, but the secondary is brand new. You had a couple guys come back, but you lost a number to the NFL. You bring in a couple transfers from Utah and ODU. You're gonna have a brand new starting safety, a brand new defensive scheme. So I think that's probably where you want to attack, which is potentially good news for Stanford, assuming they can just get a few stops. You mentioned last year's game, Stanford, Hawaii, much to my chagrin. I think I had Hawaii plus 10. I think they made it close as a favorite, and they got their doors blown off. You know why? Well, for many reasons, but part of that is because they played in week 0, and they had to play week 1. You had to rest the team come in with a lot of time to prepare, which leads me, it's a good segue, into second down and our favorite overdog. For those new here to the podcast, favorite overdog, voicemail caller. Don't forget about the voicemail this season. 959 Bad Beat called, said we should start betting some more overdogs. Think he meant favorites, but now we affectionately call them overdogs. So favorite of the weekend. I'm going to keep it easy. I'm going to go with Arizona, 31 or better against New Mexico. New Mexico played last week. On paper, you might say it was a valiant effort, but you got to remember the market just bet and bet and bet and bet and bet against this team with an FCS team that had some pieces that they had to replace. And you might say, hey, New Mexico could have won that game. They got dominated statistically. I mean, gave up 600 yards. New Mexico had 2 scoop and scores. So Bronco Mendenhall will probably get it turned around, but it's going to take some time. And what happens when you have to play in week 0 and the other team doesn't? Number one, you have to travel. They don't. You had to prepare for another opponent. They didn't. They could have prepared for you. And you had to put stuff on tape that they can now adjust for, and they didn't have to put anything on tape. Arizona, I think, comes out, should score at will. This New Mexico defense didn't look like it's going to put up much resistance. There are questions on this Arizona roster. Defensive line, outside of the San Jose State transfer. Left tackle, got to replace a pro there. Wide receiver depth outside of McMillan. So, there are some questions on this roster, but cornerback too. But I don't think New Mexico can exploit any of them. Week one versus week 0 edge here. I like Arizona to lay down the hammer. Brand new head coach thinks he wants to name a number here and put on a show with my guy Fafita. So going back to my Cats, where are you going for your favorite overdog?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. New Mexico's box score was horrific, and they were spotted 14 free points. So this is going to be a problem here for them. I'm going to stay in Norman. I love Oklahoma here. I'll reiterate 73-0 against Arkansas State in the opener. This is their first game as a team in the SEC. Jackson Arnold had a terrible bowl game, and this offensive line needs every single snap it can get over these first 3 games before they eventually have to take on Tennessee at home. That one has been circled for a very long time for Josh Heupel coming in. So I expect there to be as much starter activity on the offensive side as possible. And Temple, 5 takeaways last season, FBS low. That's pretty stuck. It's only 5 more takeaways than you and I had last year in college football. So Oklahoma all the way here.
All right, moving on to third down. Our first underdog moneyline parlay, our favorite moneyline underdogs of the weekend. I'll keep mine short and sweet. I always say that, then I ramble. I'm going to go with North Texas against South Alabama. What am I looking for, especially early in the season with these? I'm looking for variance as part of it. A lot of variance in this game. These are two teams outside the top 100 in returning production, those being South Alabama and North Texas. Very similar in what they lost, right? South Alabama lost their quarterback, their star running back, their star wide receiver. North Texas lost a 3,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver for the first time in program history. We're replacing a lot, new quarterbacks. So, but when I look at this, I think North Texas has the more reliable quarterback now. And in the Morris combo on that offense, South Alabama, major questions on the back end of their defense. And this modified air raid offense, I think, can attack that. But there's just a lot of variance with this game. So I'm going to go with North Texas to get it done. This is a South Alabama team that in the spring, what they lost I think they lost their head coach, 5 starters, 3 on the defensive side of the portal. So it's a team, a lot of turnover. Not sure the quarterback is ready. So I'm going to go with the Mean Green.
Yeah, I'm going to move over to the Mountain West, and I'm going to support an FCS team to beat a team from the Mountain West, which really isn't that shocking because in week 1, there is always a top 10 powerhouse FCS team that seems to upset one of our lowly group of 5 teams. And we have that in Sacramento State playing San Jose State. San Jose State is expected to be at the bottom of the Mountain West. Sacramento State is expected to be at least a quarterfinal team in the FCS playoffs, potentially a semifinal team. Andy Thompson is now the head coach there. He was the defensive coordinator for Troy Taylor, who we just talked about at Stanford, and he's had them in the playoffs every single year. The offense might be the most experienced in all of FCS. Their dual threat quarterback, Caden Bennett, is back. He gets all his targets from Devin Gandy, Anderson Grover, and Jared Gibson. An extremely explosive unit, an extremely high success rate unit that is going to move the ball and score a ton of points here. And Bennett was heavily recruited at quarterback by Boise State. I mean, he easily could be playing on the FBS level. And then the offensive line is one of the best in all of FCS. Also, All-American Jackson Slater returns to anchor that line. Now, the defense could be a problem when we're talking, going up against San Jose State. The defense has just 2 starters back, but they, Sacramento State, the FCS, this happens too. They reloaded from the portal. They went and raided other teams from the Big Sky, Idaho State being one of them. They got safety moving on Kenyon the third. They have players and talent on the defensive side, but you have to ask, can San Jose State take advantage of Sacramento State's defense? And we're asking that because Ken Niamalo Totolo is here from Navy, where he ran the triple option offense. But San Jose State's not running the triple option offense. They're going to run the spread and shred. And if you don't know what the spread and shred is, that is Nick Rolovich's offense when he was at Hawaii. And now their new offensive coordinator, Craig Stutzman, is going to run it. Recently, he was the passing game coordinator at Texas State last year. So you can see that, what the head coach is familiar with, the exact opposite is what's going to be on the field. And Stuckey already mentioned that there's a lot of depth charts being released with a lot of oars on it. Well, San Jose State's one of them too. Although they did come out in the presser this week and say that we have named a quarterback internally. We're not going to tell anyone who it is. It's going to be between Emmett Brown or Walker Aguette. It doesn't matter. Neither of them have any way to get the ball to their best player, which is Nick Nash, which is really the only player on this San Jose State offense. It's going to be running this version of the run and shoot. And then on the defensive side for San Jose State, they returned just 2 of their top 10 tacklers on the defense. The number is justified where it's at. It opened at 7 earlier this year. It's come all the way down to 3. There are some numbers out there that are above 3, but this is a Sacramento State team that has a chance to compete for the FCS national title going against potentially one of the worst group of 5 teams out there that is going through a scheme change that is brand new to everybody there. They don't even have a quarterback identified. So give me Sacramento State, roll Hornets, money line all the way.
Yeah, could be a long year for the Spartans. So that's our money line underdog parlay. We have little Mean Green and some Hornets, some Mean Green Hornets. Let's have a profitable year with those. That normally would do it, but we added 1 down this year. We're going for it. Not enough college coaches go for it on 4th down. We're going for it. 4th down, our favorite bet. You only get 20 seconds because we're going to talk about both these games in the main section of the pod. I'll start. Eat 'em up, Cats. Sam Houston State touching double digits, upgraded at the quarterback position. Really came on at the end of the year last year. Could have easily won 4 straight. Had some heartbreaking losses, but quarterback better. wide receiver better with some guys returning from injury. Defense lost some guys, but I think they'll be okay. And I'm not sure Rice can fully take advantage of some of the questions in the secondary. They're really going to miss McCaffrey. I think this game's close. Rice, not a team that profiles as a great, really good, bigger favorite. So give me Sam Houston, eat 'em up, Cats. Colin, you got 20 seconds to make your case. We'll break this game, I know, down more in depth later.
Imagine seeing our faces or hearing our voices for the first time, and we're talking about Sacramento State and Sam Houston State. That's what we do. So I'm going to go with USC plus 4.5 on Sunday night against LSU, one of the biggest games of the weekend. To break it down shortly, these two teams just hired a defensive coordinator, each one of them, and USC won the day with Danton Lynn coming over from UCLA, completely revamped that defense. I can't say the same about Blake Baker coming to LSU from Missouri. Missouri was horrific in defensive finishing drives. Everybody that crossed the Missouri 40 last year averaged 4.6 points per game per trip past the 40-yard line. I do not see LSU's defense improving whatsoever. That's going to be a problem in this game with that USC offense.
I concur. But I'll share my thoughts when we break that game down further in the main pod, which will be out tomorrow. This will be at the tail end, and then we'll have about an hour going through all the main games, some other games that we like. And we'll also talk the Thursday night slate. Can't forget about games on Thursday. And we'll touch on Sunday night, USC, LSU, as I just mentioned, and Monday night, Boston College, Florida State. And we'll recap a little week 0. Once again, Colin, thank you. As always, thanks to our producers in the back end. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We're going to have a lot more stuff like this on our new channel, so we appreciate all of you. Get excited. I'm excited. I know Colin's excited. Week 1 is here, and then the grind is on. We will see you for the rest of the pod tomorrow and the live show Saturday morning. Shout out to BetMGM, our sponsor, and we'll see you guys later. Cheers.
Peace out.